After all the massive activity over in the March turn, I have no resources left to build things in April. I mean, I have a few. So this is the question, do the Germans want to build a good unit and add it to their force pool, add it to their forces, or do they want to have 2 attacks or 3, 4 maybe attacks for the rest of the season? They gained so much ground in that first month that they're not really prepared to take advantage of it. TI attacks are so effective that it's hard to refuse to take advantage of them. But on the other hand, I have to keep a flow of units coming. I think I'm going to have to build a unit. Obviously, the Austrians, Italians are done. The French are done. The Germans actually have a capacity to build a fair amount of units and maybe even make a counterattack at some point, which is important because I have Brusilov now. The French with Pétain, not going to be able to make an attack. I don't know why I actually gave him a big stack of units. It may make more sense to put him here at Verdun, where he'll be a defensive asset instead. We have the Nieuport 11, so we're going to be able to counter the Eindecker. The Russians have a plane too, but it doesn't really stand up against the Eindecker, and I'm going to try to ignore it and use it potentially for an attack, but more likely defensively. I probably want it here. Keep it near Brusilov in case he makes an attack. Okay. Fortnight ends with the Italians taking a fortress here. It was already a destroyed fortress, but this puts them in a position where they can attack these Germans if they can tell that they're German. Otherwise, oops, I gave the Central Powers a BC off that they shouldn't get. I thought that was a BC. We can see the Russians filled out their line a little bit. Brusilov started an offensive. He's got another point left, so he could actually continue this. And the problem there is there's an infrastructure there. Now, an infrastructure is useless on defense, and it may be that it can be captured. I'm not sure of that, but given that they're not color-coded, it doesn't really matter either way in terms of the color coding doesn't necessarily indicate one or the other. French no money, so they kind of tried to thicken their line a little bit and reallocate it a little bit less defense towards Paris, because if the move towards Saint-Quentin is made, that brings the Brits into the war, and the game changes so significantly. We don't think the Germans are going to switch their plan at this point, that they're going to continue pushing to try to keep the Brits out. Likewise, on the Russian side. Now, we actually got to gain ground here, but not a good one, i.e. we didn't cause defender demoralization, but we did get a point of TI, which is useful, and you can see we got our planes supporting that. On the other hand, we've left Kovno sort of hanging out in the open. This is a Russian unit, however, which I believe we're going to entrench. Yeah, it's very easy to forget that, because the switch from mobile to entrenched back and forth is just such a little dance in this game that's constantly going on. Most World War I games that I've played, you kind of entrench and then your units stay entrenched, unless there's some real desire to get a lot of mobility going. In this one, I'm seeing this weird little dance because of the reinforcement rolls, and also because to launch an attack, you kind of need to have a big pile of mobile units. Well, not a big pile, but you quite often have to bring mobile units into the attack. And then they end up entrenched anyway, but it's just like there are times when I'm turning something in the backfield into a mobile unit, because it's going to be able to launch an attack next turn. Then it'll be entrenched, but then the guys who are left behind, who are in the second echelon, have the option either to fill in gaps if any occur, or I can mobilize them and use them in next turn's attack, depending on, what's going on. The really terribly designed index, which is, catches every single possible mention of the word infrastructure. I see nothing under combat or movement. Maybe there's somewhere else where it's covered under 6 here, which I think is the construction rules. But it's in 6.7, the commiserate phase, because it affects, and you're allowed to voluntarily remove them. I guess that's probably a hint that they can be captured. To me, the index is just terrible. It doesn't include enough things, and it includes every single reference to something. But I don't think there's anywhere where it's mentioned one way or another that infrastructure can be captured. I looked under the combat ones. But it seems that it can. So I think Brusilov is going to continue this offensive, because it does give him an advantage if he captures that. And you can think of it as a depot or something of supplies that, if it falls under your control, is going to be to your advantage. So I think he's going to continue the assault there with his last point. The Germans are out of points, I think, or do they have one left? No, they have one left that they're saving. They succeeded in reducing Epinal, which is causing the French to shift their forces to cover the southern frontier. Now, that may weaken this northern area, and it may change the focus of that single attack that the Germans have left. The problem is, if I've got Epinal reduced and the French can't rebuild it, I might be able to take it out with an attack. But is that worthwhile, or is it more important to gain a hex somewhere? Brusilov's attack does one good thing. It took away the last resource point for the Germans, so they're not going to be launching any sort of real attack. So it makes their decision easier. They'll just bombard Epinal and see if they can destroy it. Of course, the Germans could have taken their best unit as a loss, their 3-point unit up here, but they don't want to do that. So, I'll pull my plane back, keep it in general area. The gained ground was part of the problem with this. It penalized me to a point where I wasn't going to get the hex no matter what. I didn't get a really strong roll. Let me see if anybody else has to take their planes home. The French probably want to increase their support down here for now. Keep a flexible air. And the Germans will also move theirs. And that's about it. The Italians are out of points. They could take Trent, probably, if they had just a couple of points, but they spent their last point taking that fortress. And that is the end of whatever this month is, which is April. The thing is, the game, when you have a lot of points and the ability to attack, the turns take a long time. But as you can see with this turn, there weren't a whole hell of a lot of things that could be done. There weren't any really broad moves. There was, moving pieces isn't that expensive in terms of effort. And so the Russians having fallen back, the Central Powers units pushing forward, none of that takes a lot of time. The effort is when there's a lot of battles and when you have to think out what order you want to move which unit and stuff like that. So when you have a lot of money and a lot of options available, that's when the turns start really eating up the time. It's also when they're interesting, though. Like, nothing happened in May except the Germans shot down the old French plane. I don't remember what it was. I've tossed it in the bag. Those can't be rebuilt if there are more modern planes in existence. Eventually, the top level plane allows you to build the one layer below that, the one earlier plane. But it keeps you from, having kind of the whiff situation, which seems pretty weird, to tell you the truth. And it's exceptionally weird when you're looking at these World War I planes where obsolescence was reached, fairly quickly. So I think the game actually handles that pretty well. It also means that you don't have huge force pools of planes, with lots of really crappy old planes able to take down a new one. You might be able to husband your old planes, but you're not going to be able to rebuild them. So once they do get shot down, they're done. And that's what we had here. And that's kind of cool, because also it means no more garbage in my force pool. But that means we're going to be going into summertime. And we got some more force pool additions to add that we won't be able to build. All the countries are, well, at least the Central Powers, are tearing up their fortifications, converting boats. The Russians converted some boats as well. Austrians tore up more fortifications. They can only do one per turn, I think, for these. Otherwise, I would drop a whole bunch of money into myself. Yeah, one fortress and one non-battleship naval unit a step. Just trying to get a little bit extra money to handle the land war, because that's where the fighting is. Without Britain in the game, the German Navy's useless, and frankly, the French Navy, I probably could be reducing some of that. Probably should be. What I've got over here, just because once Britain gets in, I'll be in better shape. But I made the choice not to, and what we have for cash now is the Germans at 29, Austrians at 18, Russians at 13, French at 14, and Italians at 9. And, we still have this preponderance of money over in the Central Powers side. And as long as I'm not bringing Britain into the game, it's safe in that sense. The only problem is I still got the BCs at 13 officially. I don't know if that's correct, because I don't know. But this is liable to fall. This is in danger. So it's not like the Central Powers is really in a position where they can say, yeah, we're coasting along to victory. Not unless they push the Russians a little bit further than they have been. And there aren't really that many points in Russia. Way out here, that are available. Oh, this one. And this one. But, if we're starting to get to these, we're going to demoralize Russia before we get to those. And that's kind of not so, it's such a weird mindset to say, oh yeah, we don't mind demoralizing France, we don't mind taking what we can in France, but we're afraid to demoralize Russia because that'll bring Britain into the game. I understand the we're not invading Belgium principle. It's a lot harder to justify some of the other principles that are in play once you have Britain locked out. It makes sense in some ways. You could see Britain sending warnings saying, look, keep this to a more limited war or whatever, but it sure doesn't feel like a limited war to me. Not when we've got these many casualties kicking out there. Central Powers, always with the first move, gets to move their Eindecker out to actually hit the Newport 11s. Now, you might say this is a bad trade-off. Well, the question is, do I want to hide the Eindecker and hope that some later plane can take the Newport 11 out? And, honestly, what I want to do is I want to freeze the Newport 11 for this turn, because I think France is in a lot of trouble right now. They haven't been able to build up their army. Granted, the Germans haven't either, but the Germans have some numerical superiority and may gain something. So we're going to go for it. But the Newport is at +4. It gets its shot first. And its shot is successful, and it drives the Eindecker off. Now, what that means is that next turn, maybe I hide the Eindecker, or maybe, maybe I spend the buck to repair it and keep using it in the fight, because it's not going to get destroyed easily by a single French plane. Of course, it's a constant drain, but I can freeze their air power by continually building it up, which is something that the old plane, whatever it was, an M5S or something like that, is unable to do, because it's not on the board anymore. Otherwise, the Nieuport would have been able to maybe absorb the hit and then bring the other plane up to do something offensively or defensively. So it was kind of a mistake to lose my plane. Naval phase, I decided it's easier for me to blockade the Germans than it is the Austrians. All I need to do is get 2 ships, and I did this, out into the Norwegian Sea and 2 into the mid-Atlantic. Now, of course, the Germans are allowed to send a couple of ships out to contest this without inflicting a problem on Britain. And the Austrian Navy can set sail as well with, geez, I hope that's a German ship. This is the one that hid before, and it looks almost the same color to me. But almost. And I can see how it happened. And yeah, I could send, well, I can't send 2 German ships out because I've got this light cruiser here, so that would have to return. So this was kind of a bone, but on the other hand, I got a couple months to try to figure out what I'm going to do about it. And we'll see if we can contest those. It's expensive for me to send the battleship out there, though. That much I know. First fortnight over here in France, Kluck finally falls to Joffre, and he's been canned. Not a lot of no other attacks over here. Nothing going on over here. The Austrians have swung around the corner here. German attack here. Major. We destroyed the fortress with the artillery, but then the Austrians attacked here. The Austrians are pretty much out of cash, which is going to be a problem because the Italians are still free to act against them up here. You probably should have weakened this fortress instead of one that, I could weaken later, because I'm almost certainly going to lose this. But I'll cost some lives with it. And we'll see. Maybe I'll get a chance to build a unit there or something. I don't know. Seems unlikely, though. And I guess that's about it on their side. Now it's time for the Allies to come back, and the Russians are almost out of money already. But Italy's got a little bit left, and France has some left. So they may be able to turn the tide. The Germans have a ton of cash, though, which means whatever I do, there's a good chance that I'm in trouble very soon with the Entente powers. The German morale is getting into the danger zone. I'm at 8, and 10 is where the crisis starts. So this war could be over soon. I could have been burning those engines a little too hard, which explains all of this. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So the Russians shifting their front around a little bit. On the French side, Pétain launched a counterattack into Longwy, or whatever it is. I don't know how to pronounce these French names. And that was pretty bad, actually. A lot of bonuses, bad die roll, turned out not well for them. Over here, the Italians got kind of screwed as well. So I guess we move on to the second fortnight. Relatively quiet second fortnight puts us into July. The Russians, Brusilov tried to launch a different attack against this infrastructure, one more likely to succeed. Although, honestly, these are a mixed blessing, because if you get enough of them, you get kind of the breakthrough advantage. But the breakthrough advantage isn't a big deal right now. We're looking at an attritional battle, so I don't want to keep hitting from that hex. Unfortunately, I'll run out of hexes I can strike from. Over here, Falkenhayn, got himself removed from the map, clearing out. There was that one point Russian infantry up here in Libau, and it came down threatening Königsberg, threatening the whole supply line down here. Falkenberg had to go up. Well, he'll be available not next turn, but the turn after. I get to place him in the muster for the turn after, so kind of knocked him off the map for a bit. I really needed the shot at him, and he's not that useful. Over here, French actually did not do anything. Tried to mobilize, preparing themselves for another possible attack in the same place. The Italians hit Trent again and failed again, and they're not looking too happy, to tell you the truth. Down to only 2 resources. So, in a way, the Central Powers were, especially the Germans, the Austrians are out of points. The Germans were holding on to their points, hoarding them, looking for a better opportunity because this turn didn't look good for them. And on the same factor, well, you know, the Entente didn't really see too much of a value either. The French have a fair amount of points. They could do something or build units or whatever. You know, one or the other. You can't have them both, right? So that'll move us partway through the summer. Limited builds coming in for August. We got a couple of units this turn too. Germans doing the better out of that. And there we go. Air battle. The Eindecker won and drove the Nieuport 11 away. Either way, it pins it. And now this opens up, and this is a real advantage for the Germans, being able to move first on the air. This opens up a possibility of an attack into that hex, if I so desire. It doesn't really hurt me. I don't lose, I don't increase the frontage, so it's probably worth taking if I have the forces for it. Now, I did lay some extra troops down. The Germans put their extra army there. Get the other Eindecker up here, harassing the Russians. For the fleets, this was kind of exciting, actually. The French sitting out in 2 places which would blockade the Germans. Well, the Germans sent Hipper out, and he got to here before he got stopped. He actually has 3 ships with him, 2 heavy cruisers and his battle cruiser squadron. Or, I don't know, it's not a single battle cruiser, I'll tell you that much. Well, the French withdrew, and now they're down around Gibraltar. You know, trying to figure out, well, can we handle this? You know, is there a danger of France being blockaded? Not by 3 German ships, I don't think. There's a port box off map, so there is not. And 3 is the most that I can commit. The problem or danger is Hipper's fleet might set sail now that the French have broken away and head towards the Mediterranean. Without the English out there to stop it, this game takes a different flavor, and the French fleet is not capable of controlling the seas. The French and Italians had their own trouble against the Austrians, and without being able to launch the battleships, they're too expensive to sail with. We got the old pre-dreadnoughts and stuff, and you know. I am realizing, though, some of the monetary or economic aspects that I've been seeing probably wouldn't apply in the historical scenario. Remember, Britain pulls in a bigger sum of money than France does. Between the 2 of them, they have more than Germany. So Germany's been able to control the French front and the Russian front and really throw the Entente into a position where they are really cash starved. It doesn't mean the game's unbalanced under these circumstances. We're seeing some serious issues like this, which are scary. But you know, I think that the TI level being so low for the Entente has a lot to do with them just not having the cash to launch the offensives. And hence, they're also not getting the technological advances, and it kind of makes sense that Germany would have more resources to devote to technology and the assaults, etc., than than the Entente would in this situation without the Brits to absorb a lot of the damage. It's kind of amazing how well the French line, for example, has actually held. And the Russian line, too. That's not terribly ahistoric. So, yeah. I'm a lot more impressed with how this is representing the war than I am with historical scenarios for either SPI's World War I or the Rand Great War. It's hard to talk about Paths of Glory because I feel like the cards skew the game in ways that are terrible. I play with the historical, take some of the points out of Italy because otherwise, the game is completely unbalanced. Compared to the other La Grande Guerre, well, this doesn't have what tends to be the biggest blemish on that game, which is the problem of the navies. And I think seeing this, I see a way towards fixing La Grande Guerre's naval rules by putting some sort of limit on how long a naval engagement can last. This game does that very nicely. The other side, though, with the troops, with the manpower never reaching above what it started at, well, I think that's actually more to do with my psychology than anything else. I have an advantage, so I will continue to attack. I'll continue to gain things. I'll try to destroy. In that game, maybe I overemphasize national will. In this game, well, with the Brits not in it, we're not seeing a balanced situation. I still think we'd probably see me trying to boost the TI. Remember, the Germans would have gotten less attacks if they had less money, and the Entente would have gotten more. So we'd probably be on about historical track with the amount of damage that I've done to both sides. But I think that amount of damage would stay there. And I feel as though the level of attacks that I make, except maybe that I'm making at times more small attacks, is it corresponds with the historical level of bloodshed. Fortnite, the German attack against this hex, not effective. Not terrible. However, the Russian center is collapsing, and they're going to have to do something about that. This was necessitated. The Germans launched an attack here. We're getting close to Brest-Litovsk. This attack was launched, successful, and then that left kind of a problem in terms of defending my siege guns. So I had to launch an attack coming out of here and hit this unit. And now things are a lot weaker. Of course, I can kind of fall back to the river line, maybe. I don't have more Russian units coming in, though, next turn. I didn't have the money. Russia, I think, still has points for whatever that's worth. It's this weird situation where sometimes you're going to lose RPs, sometimes you're going to lose units. They lost units, which is usually worse, but that means that they have a couple RPs on the track left, as do the French, as do the Italians. The Germans are down to 4. Austria's done. They had to spend their last one on that attack, which means I don't get an attack coming in over here against the Romanians that I kind of wanted to make. And, well, I've got Conrad. I'll still move him. I don't know what he's going to do, but he was also another opportunity that has now passed. Tan continues his assaults in out of Verdun. Well, he's got this big advantage here, he might as well, right? And it's increasing TI and everything else. So what the heck? Not to great effect, but not that terrible, I guess. I'm a little confused because I think I screwed up my roll. I don't know what I screwed up. I think I took the hits in the wrong direction. I think it was a 1 RP instead of an RP1, which means the French get their point back, the Germans lose 1, but the French lose their best unit. Okay. I just didn't read the chart right, and I'm remembering that. The Italians had an absolute disaster. Now, they recovered and threw more units in here, but these guys are mobile. There's some possibility of a German counterattack there. I highly doubt it, but who knows? You know, it might be of some value to hit non-entrenched units, but they're in the mountains. They're tough to kill. Elsewhere, I'm going to consider whether there's anything I can do here that's terribly valuable. See, the problem is I can't attack, so I kind of have to stay in supply because I won't be able to, you know, mobilize someone and then maybe next turn cut his supply off. Plus, there's a supply line here if I leave that, so I think I pretty much am stuck with what's here. For the Russians, Brusilov launched another attack. It did not go well, but like with Petain's attack, it increases the TI level. And you can see the Allies are actually making their way towards being able to make those. I don't know how big an advantage they're going to be. They also tightened their line a little bit. You can see lost some territory here, but the Austrians can't attack. They're out of money. The only people with money left are the Germans and the Entente, and not a lot in either case. And that brings us to the second fortnight. Essentially no attacks. The Germans passed on trying to cross the stream here or attacking this or whatever. None of that looks terribly valuable. So for example, to go here, well then I'd need to build an infrastructure, and there's a danger when you're outnumbered to trying to do any kind of weird maneuvering to get you out of things. For over here on the French front, neither side really saw much advantage. The Germans did make their attack, I think, yeah, against the Hex where they had the plane again. The French are set up with their plane in place once more. They're going to absorb the Eindecker if it wants to keep throwing itself at them. And we'll have to build up our, spend our last reinforcement point on building that plane up. For the Russians, Brusilov no longer can really launch his attacks. He's just too low on units, so we kind of built as good a defense as we can against what the Germans are pushing for. And just making sure I don't have a Swedish unit here. I know I did at one point, but I shifted it into play. I don't know how much it matters, but I guess this will move forward a little bit. It's really not. The bombers are totally ineffective. Not worth the cost as far as I'm concerned. They only cost $2, but so far I don't think they've done any damage yet. And they can get shot down by enemy planes. The Zeppelin's really unlikely to, because I can fly it, you know, out to here or something. But still. And not a lot coming in. Not a lot of points left. We're at the point in the season where, hey, we spent all our money already. Push through the first part, the pre-campaign section of the August turn. And not a whole hell of a lot happening in this turn as a whole. We're going to see some repositioning, but basically almost no attacks. Because after builds, the French had to spend their 1 point to rebuild their airplane, make it safe from the Eindecker shooting it down. And then, well, the Eindecker withdrew so that it's not in range. But No, the French have no money. The Germans spent their money on making sure they have a replacement unit in the channel. They don't see any attack that they must make this turn. Without a lot of cash to back up the attack with ancillary and subsidiary attacks. Subsequent would be a better word there. I don't see a terrible need to make a single attack. I don't see anywhere where I'm just dying to unleash, one stack. So it seemed like buying a unit was of more value there. So the only people who have money are the Italians and the Russians. And they don't have a whole hell of a lot. Possibility of an Italian attack exists simply because it would crank the TI up, but I'm not sure it's a terrible advantage, and it may leave me badly exposed, so I'll probably not take it. Likewise with the Russians, I don't have a lot of territory that I can safely do anything from. I don't have a lot of extra troops kicking around that I can use, so I doubt there'll be anything there. And that probably means there might be a short little fall offensives on one side or the other, probably the Central Powers. But in general, we might manage to save some money and dig into some of those. I doubt it. We'll probably kill off as many as we build. What we did see, though, is some naval action. And that was kind of cute. The French fleet, the Germans started chasing the French fleet, and you can see Hippers catching up to those pre-dreadnoughts. And it honestly looks like he's probably going to manage to engage them. And then the Austrian fleet can't really move, but I can send some U-boats out. I can't send German U-boats out even, because I can't send this many cruisers out. I knew there was a reason I could only send one out. So maybe chasing isn't such a great idea. At least chasing at that speed. Because I'm not sure that I all that heavily outnumber these suckers. I do get a lot of shots with my leaders, and it's not like the German Navy is doing me much good right now. So yeah, I think I'm going to try to prevent the blockade by chasing. Just not as sure the French don't want to engage it, but whatever. So we won't have the blockade this time, but maybe if we get a victory over the German squadron and then over the Austrians as well, we'll be able to impose the blockade in 17. Well, maybe late 16, the winter 16. But it's 17 where the points start to accumulate, where you really do want to have the blockade in place. And that early blockade didn't do me much good. Anyway, I guess we move on with the campaigns. And like I said, I don't think we're going to see much of anything at all. Finally, a little bit more repositioning. You can see the Romanians spread out a little bit. We get the Greeks moving forward, Serbians coming down. The Russians did launch an attack by Brusilov again. No effect. I tell you, one of the more annoying things in this game is definitely the little dance of the counters, where you're constantly looking through to make sure, hey, do I have an entrenched unit in this stack? I need one, but I want to keep most of my stack mobile if I can, because that gives me flexibility. It gives me more chance of a reinforcement. I find that really an obnoxious factor in the game. Makes me glad for tweezers, though. I guess that's it for summertime, and we shall push into the autumn season. And look, more Newport. Germans are going to be outclassed air power-wise pretty heavily. We've already got the Newport 11 over here. The 17's just about the same. So as soon as I can start buying those, it's going to be a problem. And not a lot of money left over, but more comes in. I guess there really isn't much to say at this point, except we need to check See how much time I got left on this video. This is our money track after everything's kind of landed, and the Russians are in real trouble. They have $7 for the season. It's because of their huge penalty that they're taking here, and I don't really want to send French money there, for the simple fact that the French are kind of stretched thin as well. So what I'm looking at is Russia's probably going to start on their way towards their collapse, and to some extent that might be good because it brings Britain in. To the other extent, I got a fair number of of bargaining chips left over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 if you count that. I wouldn't count the ones over here, except that the Turks are probably going to be able to grab them as well. So a Russian collapse kind of means I have to do a lot better with the Entente than I've been doing, and that's frightening. On the other hand, there are opportunities, but as long as the Austrians can they don't necessarily have to keep bludgeoning the Russians. As long as they can commit some of their forces to defending themselves against the miners, they may be in okay shape. They have a fair amount of money. The Germans, of course, took a big hit as well, but they were way up. So, yeah, they were up here. So, economically, they're doing okay. Stability-wise, they're closer to their own collapse problem, their own crisis, than the Russians are. September, some troops trickle in. There's a lot of points. Got some troop buildup, not as much as maybe would be expected, but the feeling is, well, after next turn, well, after this turn, really, additional expenditures don't really matter, and we can buy at a greater rate, lesser rate, whatever. But right now is the time when the points are necessary. And honestly, everybody's kind of low on points, so a few extra pieces next turn is nice. Getting a big flow didn't seem terribly important, although maybe it's the opposite of what I should actually be thinking. German Eindecker got knocked out by the Newport 11. It went in to pin it down. Then we've got naval attack, and this is what's going on. The Germans failed to get their surprise because we have just a vanguard and the French have a main battle fleet. But what I can do is pick off those PDs, and Hipper gets to fire first, twice at +4 because he's a leader. So he'll go first against one of these PDs, knock it down, and then we'll see what we do with the second shot. Okay, well, it's only one round. It's only one hit, even though it's doubles, because it's not like some other things. So I can shoot again. Now, if I shoot again, it means that I only have to, if I hit again, and I only have to undergo hits from 2 of the PDs. So I'm going to go for a different PD this time. And that also is successful. Yeah, that's not very likely. I have the feeling I didn't roll very well there, right? Okay, but now the 2 3-point PDs get to fire first. And they're going to go after Spey's cruiser. Why am I only allowed 2? Because I have another cruiser over there that I didn't move. Okay, so that's a hit on Spey. If I succeed in hitting him again, I get rid of Spey, and he's actually dead in that case. 6, 7, 8, 9. So we got rid of him. Okay. Now I go down to the crappy 2-pointers, which will go after Hipper. And at least we're not going to kill him. Nope. Okay, so it's 2 step losses in each case. the Germans have to withdraw. I'm going to put the French fleet under this counter, actually. And subs don't matter. So I don't know what my withdrawal right is. I may be too far from a port, which would be terrible. I'll have to look that up. I'm not really sure there are any restrictions, including my radius, which means I believe this is going to be my closest port. Now, I cheated before, I'm pretty sure, by coming out after I've been returned to port in the same month. That's actually illegal. At this point, the French fleet gets to move, and I probably want to skirt around those U-boats, which got too close. Way too often with the video here. I hate putting together a huge bunch of videos, but this is another place where the game kind of falls apart in terms of not providing you with counters. It doesn't give you anything to indicate that I know of that this is not for that. That if an enemy enters your hex, you're destroyed. And that is actually the case here. Now, how likely is that to happen? Pretty much not, because I could only do it through a naval invasion. So now I got to decide what I'm up to with the French fleet, and it's only got a 5 movement point unless those PDs get slower when they get hit. They do not. I don't want to retire back and try to repair them. It's just too expensive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm in danger of being stopped. 7, 8. This is kind of annoying, and they're stopped there. I could conceivably pull my battleship out. I don't want to. But there is the possible risk that the Austrians want to go engage with their bigger ship. I think they don't really care. They're going to wait until a blockade is set. I don't think there's any naval action going up in the Baltic, so we'll go to the Austrian fleet and we'll move to there. We make a search. There's 4 French ships, 2 submarines. We find them. So now I get 2 shots at 2 against I'll take the damaged ships just to get them out of the way. +2, that kills 1. +2, that kills the other. And the French Navy is still probably unable to manage a blockade after that. Now, 3 dice against the ASW of 12, and we are missed. Now, I only moved, I think like 3 movement points. I could continue moving 4, 5. We can't counter again. 6. And now we start getting that annoying point where I'm over the limit. Oh, these had to return to port. Never mind. Okay. Batena is gone. Strangely enough, we still have Joffre back here. He failed in a big attack against there. The Italians did some crappy attack here. You know, not too terrible, but the roll was bad. I think they were risking and maybe succeeded in getting a demoralization, but I think they had that previously. The French certainly got one. I don't remember if I talked about the Central Powers. They managed to knock some Romanians out, and actually I've got to do something about them now. Spread out a little bit. I don't know if that's good or bad, but whatever. Kind of don't want the Austrians to be able to move easily. Over here, the Germans didn't gain much ground, although they got a hex here. They hurt themselves, and then Brusilov was able to launch an attack here. This was almost a bluff, this air unit there. If he put it over on the infrastructure hex, it probably would have ended up with the Germans not attacking out of it and everything. Well, instead we ended up being able to take that hex. I don't know how much value it is, but one thing that's going to be difficult is remembering, so if the Russians manage kind of a successful regaining of territory and then get pushed back again, I don't know how we mark down that they shouldn't get penalized for losing their cities. Again, there are a lot of things. I think I know I was thinking of one with the boats, which was some kind of marker to indicate that those guys should get disrupted, should get damaged or destroyed if their port falls. Likewise here, there's no way to really mark those things if they end up passing back and forth between hands several times. There's a lot to this game that would be helped by additional counters, and given that there's a hell of a lot of these, I'm not sure that maybe those shouldn't be used in some way. So for example, I could mark, hey, this is Central Powers now, but if this is captured by by the Russians, I guess I could use an Entente control marker there, just to indicate that I shouldn't lose points off my national morale if those get retaken. So now we're going into the second fortnight. Point-wise, the Russians spent themselves on that, and that could be a real problem because their forces have been weakened. Ooh, I got some rationalization of my line to make. Crap. Looks like I'm going to be pulling back a hex everywhere. Whoops. Yeah. And, I had the extra unit for the attack, but I think the attack was well worthwhile. This infrastructure hex, worst comes to worst, I can just destroy it. But it does give me a nice launching platform if I am thinking of counterattacks. And the Germans really left it open. They didn't have an entrenched unit or anything because they were counting on their mobile warfare to gain them a hex, I guess. I don't know. September, and God, the Germans are really hurting. They made some attacks. I think there were some Austrian attacks too that did not go at all well, and you can see their line looks pretty weak now too. The difference is that they can rebuild and the Russians can't. And of course, if Britain were in the game, this would be very, very different because Germany wouldn't have this huge point value. Italy can't afford to make attacks. France shoulders the burden and launches a couple here and then back again here, which gets them up to some TI value. The problem, of course, is they don't have the manpower to now take advantage of it. But next year, we'll be able to start making attacks that potentially don't have all the disadvantages that TI has, that a lack of TI has. The problem is I still want to make big attacks. Of course, the Verdun sector is really helping me there because those two arrows mean that I have +4, and that makes up for a lot of the penalties that I'm facing, like a stream and entrenchment and stuff like that. Here the Germans got really hosed. They tried to attack here and they lost like both units that attacked. They would have lost 3 if they had 3. Yeah. And you know what? I forgot. Nope, they didn't have to roll. It was a minor battle. Okay. So this is the last good weather turn, October coming up. And we'll see if there's anything that's going to move, but the armies are just so beaten up that, these excess points, though, are so attractive because I can launch, if I can get 2 units together, even if they don't attack together, they wouldn't want to. But if I can get two units together, they can put, or a place where I have a little bulge, I can push a hex, destroy the enemy there, and then move in. And, you know, here especially, I could take myself another city, assuming that I have enough manpower to fill in the gap, which is a big assumption. The Germans are so deep in Russia at this point, not the Austrians, but the Germans, that they're going to have a hard time getting units up to the front. Their thin front doesn't really look like they're going to be able to fling units right up to it. Over here, I could make attacks and, you know, possibly gain some ground. And I probably will be focusing more there with my few German points that I have. But we'll see. Of September, and the armies are truly at the breaking point again. Yep. I forgot to do Italians. I believe they're going to launch an attack. Hold on. Where the hell didn't work? Yeah, there are no more Italians left. The Alps are tough to fight in, right? Especially when there's a river there and entrenchments and everything else. Yeah. But it increases my TI, which is now almost all the way up. Which means I'm succeeding on any die roll under a 5 with a TI attack. So the warfare's gotten a lot more mobile. You're still entrenched because you get the bonuses for it, but it's sort of this weird semi-mobile warfare. The French launched their attack coming out of Verdun again. A nice little attritional attack. It actually worked well for them. Elsewhere, though, the Germans, during their actions, punched a hole and have a somewhat more rational line there with a nice bulge, but, you know, it's not as deformed as it was. Some movement over in the Balkans. Mainly, the Romanians are looking at, hey, we get an attack again pretty soon. Let's set up for it. Serbians come down, blocking the Greeks off from being able to do an invasion of Serbia, but Salonika has fallen again. Germans have reduced Kovno a little bit, and you could see the Russians are just falling back as much as they can. I actually have another move here with them, don't I? No, I held off. I don't know. Anyway, Russia looks like a lost cause, but as they go over the edge, that's going to bring the Brits in. And then when the Brits come in, it's a question of, well, do the Germans want to use their U-boats? Point-wise, right now, the Entente's sitting on, I think, 12, which is what they need to win. So if I can keep the war on a limited basis, I should be able to do all right, because I don't have to actually collapse the Russians, and I don't have to actually get close to Paris. All I have to do is try to grind the Entente down further to the point where I can actually get some territories. Optimally, I'd love to take Serbia. There's, you know, 2 points there that I don't have. Likewise, if Romania could be pressed into, there's a couple of points there, right? No, there's one down. No, Dobruja is actually Bulgarian. So yeah, there's nothing there, but there's this, which is kind of tough for me to reach. So yeah, I'd like to keep the Brits out of the war for the whole extent. Certainly an interesting option. Anyway, I think we're far enough along that I can send this one up and then start on, November is a winter turn, and there's no money, so not much is going to happen. The Italians could launch another attack. Yeah, for the most part, there's just nothing that's going to happen during the winter. And then when we hit, the interphase, and then the building up through the December through February, the true winter, as it were, we're a lot more prepared to go. The funny thing about this is winter feels more like it did in non-World War I. I'm not saying that operations didn't slow down tremendously, but they didn't halt. And you can't afford, unless it's absolutely key. There were winter offensives, and they're just not worth doing here. So, I don't know. Anyway, up it goes.